Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I am so excited you're here to listen to today's episode. This idea came to me because I was helping my daughter work on a presentation for communication. And I thought, hey, this will be a good podcast episode talking about how to have courageous, centered conversations. It's one of the number one things I would say I work with couples and individuals to find their voice and use it in a healthy way. And the fear, the paralyzing fear they have of hurting someone else getting mad at them, rejecting them, abandoning them, judging them. There is so much fear in having these conversations that they hold back and they don't say anything. And what we suppress becomes repressed in our bodies. Emotionally, what we don't talk about festers and grows, can come out behaviorally in addictions such as shopping, drinking, smoking, gambling, spending, eating. It can come out in social media. So many ways it can come out because we're not really connecting to our bodies, what we feel, and processing it. So today, we are going to talk about all areas of how to have a courageous conversation. So I was helping my daughter with this and just started kind of brainstorming. And before you knew it, had an outline together, and she's going to present it at a leadership conference she's involved in. And I thought, this is so paramount to learn. And yet the practical application of it, it can be hard. And these are skills for a lifetime. If you can practice these now and utilize them in your current life with your relationships, with your children, with your partner, with your friendships, coworkers, neighbors, anybody you're in a relationship with, this will transform how you feel and the confidence that you know how to have and start a courageous conversation. It's life-changing. So if you want to grab a notebook or listen to this on repeat, share it with your friend, your partner, someone that you want to also practice having courageous conversations with, or family members. I highly recommend it for those that are open and willing to grow, that can receive it and do some self-reflection. And then you can practice with each other. You can say, hey, wanted just to kind of practice a courageous conversation. Are you open to that? This is important to start now. Please don't wait. I think this is one of the most critical skills that you can learn and implement right away. So the journal that I have will go nicely with today's podcast. So be sure to grab it at Kristen, KRISTEN, Boyce.com/free resources. You'll also get my newsletter. And I try to keep you informed and give you helpful, growth filling content. So I don't oversaturate you. I'm not going to send you a million emails. So please know that I want to give you valuable information that will expand you emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, in all ways. So let's dive into how to have a courageous conversation and step out of your comfort zone and tolerate discomfort. So this is important. First of all, we have to take deep breaths. We have to ground and center before we even think about having a conversation. So first thing I do is my square breathing. If you've listened to this podcast, followed me on social, you will hear me repeat deep breathing and square breathing. It is the essence when you practice it to get to the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest and digest, rather than the sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. We don't want to be living in that space because it wreaks havoc on our body if we're in the sympathetic nervous system. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to put your feet on the floor pressing into your feet. I want you to take a deep breath. Inhale through your nose for 4. You're going to hold that breath and then a slow exhale out your mouth like you're cooling soup or cooling a cookie. So let's do it together. Feet on the floor. I'm adjusting in my seat. Big, deep inhale through your nose. The hold is important. Hold and then release slowly out your mouth. Getting the full benefit of the breath helps the nervous system rest and digest and know that you can handle the conversation with confidence. It doesn't mean you're not going to be nervous. You're going to have some fear pop up. I just want you to know that developmentally, to be able to have a centered, calm on your end, can't control the other person, courageous conversation, it's important that you're centered and you're accessing your higher self, your adult self. The inner child might come online and you're going to go, honey, I know you're afraid to have this conversation. And this is essential to your development to stay in your adult self. I've had many clients say, why was I so afraid to have these conversations? What scared me so much? And we can reflect back and look at where this birthed to not be able to use your voice because 1, it wasn't okay in your family system to say how you really, really feel. There was a price to pay. Someone took it personally, got reactive, yelled and screamed, or couldn't tolerate that you might have a different opinion, belief, religious questions, sexual questions. Maybe you weren't allowed to question anything. It wasn't tolerated for you to separate and individuate and be an individual person that is trying to figure out what you like, what you don't like, what you agree with, what you might not agree with. And this can evolve and change over time. It can actually change minute to minute, depending on the subject. If you are open and you get a lot of information, you can live more in the gray area rather than a black and white, right or wrong, good or bad. And that expands your ability to tolerate different opinions and viewpoints. So part of growth is connecting to your own self, what you like and what you don't like. And if you weren't able to do that in childhood, it wasn't safe to use your voice, meaning you weren't allowed to say how you felt or what you wanted because 1, the parent would just get so dysregulated and maybe there was a consequence, a price to pay. Maybe you were punished physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Maybe there was a consequence of disconnection. So you didn't even bring it up, or you saw siblings maybe bring something up and you saw them maybe get shunned. Maybe they got ridiculed, shamed, criticized, or judged, or maybe that was you. Or maybe your parents had such strong views that they didn't allow you to even question them. And as an adult, you started questioning things and were kind of afraid to go different places because as a child, you weren't exploring all the questions you had in the world. You weren't saying how you felt, or maybe you were confused by something. And so in relationships, you don't learn how to tolerate or even know how to start a conversation because it's too scary. It's too dysregulating and uncomfortable. So the first thing we're going to work with is kind of understanding childhood and how that might have shaped you. And maybe in the classroom, you got shunned for speaking up, maybe with a coach. It could have been with a friend. Whatever happened that left an imprint, either spoken or not spoken, or unspoken rules. And you learned that it wasn't safe to, or tolerated even to bring up how you really felt or question things. And it's really tragic. Then you go throughout life not knowing who you are, not feeling like it's okay or safe to have a voice and share how you feel in a centered way. And relationships become really hard and really challenging. And I really want to just say it's what I work with the most in therapy is freeing clients to be who they are, feel safe enough to tolerate differences, and know that it's okay as an adult to be who you are. And I'm not talking about, I'm going to rule out domestic violence relationships, abusive relationships. That's not what I'm talking about here today. So I want to make a preface. If that's the case, please seek, there's many nonprofits that can help or get a great therapist, emdr, emdria.org is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Those are therapists that are trauma trained, and I highly recommend a trauma therapist. It doesn't necessarily have to be EMDR, but a trauma therapist. Okay, having said that, these are for folks that are much like all of us in learning how to communicate in a healthy way. So, okay, we got step 1 is grounding and centering. Step 2 is what is your intention for the conversation? What do you hope will come from this conversation? It's not being attached to the outcome, because once you can reach the level where you're not attaching to a certain outcome and you're just doing it for your own growth and healing, to be able to connect through courageous conversations, it will then change how you approach conversations. So I think it's really important that you're looking at, what do I want to bring to the conversation? So you might set an intention of being loving, compassionate, empathic, and that you will self-regulate. That might be one of your biggest intentions in the conversation, to stay self-regulated, meaning to stay calm through your breath, through feeling your feet on the floor. You might need to bring something that's comforting to you and have it in your hand. I even recommend, honestly, this is super helpful to me, write a letter to the person that you want to have a courageous conversation with. Write it out. Just dump it all out on the page. And if you worked with me as a client, you know I love this because I do this in my own life. All of my journals have letters to people. Write the letter, put it down on the page, just let it rip. Everything you want to say. And then you're going to reread the letter and you're going to come out with, what is your centered message that you are trying to communicate to the person? What is it you're trying to say? So maybe you have 3 or 4 bullet points that you're trying to say, and I'm going to go over how to do that. How do you communicate that? But let's get it all down on the paper. Write a letter to them. You're not giving them this letter. The purpose is for you to get clarity on what you want to say and to feel more confident when you do have this conversation, that you know what you're trying to communicate. And here's the other thing. When you have these courageous conversations, it's important that you recognize when your inner child is coming to the table and saying something, and when your adult self. What do I mean by that? So if I'm intense, chances are I have a younger part online that is, it might be a teenage self. It might be a part where I might be stuck in more anger response. That needs to be tended to. I'm not going to say you're going to extinguish anger or anything like that, but you want to be able to be regulated and calm in the conversation. So really look at your intention. Are you trying to get this other person to change? Are you trying to fix this other person? Or you want the other person to agree with you and see your point of view? The other person may be incapable of acknowledging, mirroring back, which I'm going to teach you, or really being able to see your side of things. They might be so defensive, and go back and listen to the defenses episode. We'll link it in the show notes. Why so defensive? I mean, that's the name of the podcast episode, I believe, because we all have defenses. You'll have defenses even in the conversation. You've got to check your own defenses. So instead of focusing on the other person, really focus on self-regulating. That might be your intention. Or maybe you want to come with love. That might be hard to do. Maybe you're going to come back to self-regulation so you can access love and empathy. Look at your intention for the conversation. What is your goal of the conversation? If your goal is to get the other person to apologize, be careful, because you cannot change someone else. If you're expecting expectations, and Lamont said expectations are resentment, and resentments waiting to happen. So the more expectations you have, the more you're going to be let down and disappointed if it doesn't go how you expected it to go. And it's okay if it doesn't go exactly how you want it to go. The goal for you is to grow, to be able to have more expansive and uncomfortable conversations. I have been met over the course of years with many uncomfortable conversations, and where the other person, I've hit a developmental block maybe, and I'm not saying I'm better than or anything, because I've certainly been on the other side where I'm the developmental block. So please know I'm human. Nothing is above me at all. And so I've been where I have said my I feels, which I'm going to get to structure in a minute. I have said it in a calm way, and it just never was received. And I had to accept that possibly wasn't going to happen with this person. So I would write letters and send those as opposed to trying to have a conversation. And then I would process it in therapy. So please do not internalize it. If it doesn't go well, please talk to somebody about it. Process how you felt. Maybe it's a friend, maybe your partner, maybe a therapist, a coach, whatever that looks like. Please process what that brought up for you. Anger, grief, disgust, sadness, fear, whatever the feelings, it might be all three. I mean, it might be all of, not all three, but all of those emotions. Please don't navigate it by stuffing it down or numbing it or avoiding it. So let's get into, after we've grounded, we've centered, we've kind of looked at our goals and intentions, and we've really kind of gotten what we want to communicate. Now, here's the structure for the conversation. Okay. Don't say, can we talk right now? I have something really important to tell you. It just sets up somebody on the other end going, almost like a fight or flight, like you're prepared to fight almost, or we need to talk. Oh, just X-nay that from your vocabulary. Do not start a conversation with we need to talk. Why do you think that is? Because people are ready for defensiveness. They're ready to be kind of quote unquote attacked. They're ready to be shamed. They're ready to be told how they're not good enough and what they're doing wrong. So I recommend do not start that way. Here's how I do recommend. And I love Dr. Harville Hendricks' work. I don't agree with everything, but you can take nuggets from his work. He wrote the books, one book I'm recommending, Getting the Love You Want. And so I'm taking snippets from his work. And then I'm also integrating my own techniques and ways that I've learned to have courageous conversations in coaching couples with therapy, practicing role plays. And I highly recommend, speaking of role plays, if you are scared to have a conversation, please role play it with your therapist. I cannot tell you how many times I've helped role play a conversation, and it may not go at all how we role played it. And yet I am helping you have more confidence in staying on your message rather than getting pulled off or gaslit or when to have a boundary. Like we've practiced some of these like roadblocks that may come up, and you have more confidence to have the courageous conversation. So if there is somebody that you really think, I need coaching on this, I need to role play this, please role play it with someone. And maybe it's a friend who can, or your partner who can role play really well. I'm a big believer in role play, huge believer in role playing it. And I do this with my kids a lot. They're teens now, college and high school. And we have role played since they were little. I will help them find their voice, use their words in their own way, but help give them confidence and structure so they can have these conversations. And I'm telling you, it is the greatest skill that you can have. Do they do it perfectly every time? Heck no. Do I do it perfectly? There's no such thing as perfect. These are just guideposts for you to take away. So having said that, let me give you some tips and tricks. The first one is you're coming with a mindset to listen to understand. Listen to understand where the person's coming from. And the other thing is saying up front, I don't need you to fix this. I don't need any advice. I just need you to listen and acknowledge what you heard. So this sets up dynamic where you're setting up an intention. Like I want the intention for this conversation is not for you to give me advice or tell me what to do or fix it or give me a solution or problem solve this. And maybe for some conversations, you do need that. So you could say something like, hey, wanted to brainstorm or problem solve this. Are you open to doing that? So be clear with what you're wanting from this conversation. Most people do not want solutions. They want you to hear what they have to say, acknowledge it, offer validation, which does not mean that you agree with everything, and offer empathy. That is what people want. They want to be heard, understood, known, and loved, to feel like they're enough. And so this conversation, Courageous Conversations, is about offering that, giving that, and asking for that. Now, it doesn't mean the other person is going to be capable of acknowledging, hearing you without defensiveness, and offering empathy. Most people never learned how to do this. And so you're going to bump up into their inner child and just take a deep breath, recenter. If your goal and intention, which I highly recommend, is staying self-regulated, that needs to be your return to the breath. Return to the breath. You get triggered by what they say or how defensive they get, or they gaslight you, go back to the breath. So stay away. And if you've listened to this podcast, you know I'm going to tell you, do not use the word always or never. Even if the person does it every single time, do not say the words always and never. I will give you a 99% chance, 99.9% chance you are going to get met with a defensive. No, I don't. You do this. You're going to get met with defense. Also, the word but. I love you, but you always are yelling at me. That may be true. The word but is like taking a giant eraser to that first statement of I love you. Replace it with and. So stay away from the word but. I have some clients that it's almost like a tick. Like they cannot help it. They'll go, I think what you said, it makes sense, but you never tell me how you feel. I'm like, it almost is like a condescending, I'm better than you. They don't mean that. Their intention is not to deliver that, but that's what the other person hears. You're an idiot. You're stupid. And I'm right. You're wrong. Even if the person didn't say that. Now you cannot control how the other person receives what you're saying when you're centered, grounded, present. So I'm giving you some tips and tricks to stay away from. Do not start sentences with you. You always, you never, you looked this way at me. You looked angry at me. You are angry. Do not tell people how they feel. Do not tell people how they look by starting off with a you. You are guaranteed defensiveness. Do not do that. How many couples do this? A ton. And when I say we're going to use I feel statements with an emotion in there, 99% of the time, someone will say, I feel like you, fill in the blank. I feel like you don't listen to me and you're always on your phone. I'm like, oh, here we go. We're going to have a moment. We're defensive. So take a deep breath. If you notice you do just say that and do that, say, oh, let me start over. Let me try again. I just trying to stay away from the words always and never and using the word but. So let me try again, catch yourself and restart. You can always restart. And I do this often. I'll have to kind of acknowledge what I said and say, let me try again. Again, there's no perfect way, but I'm trying to make sure you're saying it in a regulated, centered way. So don't say, I feel like you are always defensive. Say, I feel sad and scared because I really want to talk to you. And I'm afraid that it's going to be met with judgment, criticism, and anger. Do you see how I did that? I connected to what I feel, which is an emotion. You have to put an emotion in there. Try on fear, sadness first. Try those on first because those are met a lot better. Confused. Some people, it's not a core emotion, but that's another one. I feel confused. Unclear is good. There's not good or bad, but those are helpful to say. A lot of people say overwhelmed when they feel stressed. That's okay. I just want you to own how you feel. Own how you feel. Take responsibility for how you feel. That is going to help when you're communicating in a courageous conversation. Then you're going to start off with an acknowledgement sandwich. This is a key piece in courageous conversations. It's something I've practiced over the years and I have clients practice and I say, go do this and come back and tell me how it goes. So I'll say the acknowledgement first. So you're going to acknowledge, be thankful, offer gratitude, however you want to do that. But the acknowledgement needs to come first. So it will look like, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I am so grateful that you're willing to grow and learn and expand. And I feel sad because I would like more deeper conversations with you. And I'm afraid to bring it up oftentimes because I'm scared to push you away. And I cherish our relationship so much. I just did an acknowledgement sandwich. What did I do? At the beginning, I offered gratitude for their willingness to meet. Then I shared my fear and kind of what I want. around the relationship, fearful of having my desire for deeper conversation will push you away, and how much I value the relationship. So versus me going, I am so sick and tired because you're constantly coming at me and you never want to talk. You're coming at me over silly things at the house and you never want to talk to me. Okay, feel the difference. Just notice the difference in your body. I love my deep breaths. So that my intention for the conversation is to create more connection, stay self-regulated, and I want to have deeper conversations. That is my heart's desire. And so how do I tell my partner or my friend or my coworker or whomever you're working with that you want to have deeper conversations? And do they want the same thing? The next thing is check the story you have about how they're going to react. Most people will play out, for example, play out the story of what other person's going to say. And then they're like, they won't have the conversation. This is an epidemic within families. I'm telling you, in couples and friendships, quite frankly, they won't have the conversation because they'll tell me, I already know what they're going to say. They're going to say, and then they tell me what they're going to say. And I say, okay, so what if they say that? It's not for them. This is for your growth. This is for you to be able to have adult, courageous conversations, because you're not going to have a healthy relationship with your kids, your partner, your relationships without learning to do this. It has to be learned, or we cannot have a connective relationship. If we don't talk about things, you're not going to have a healthy relationship. You're going to be repeating a parent-child or child-child dynamic. So someone's going to be the parent in the relationship, someone's going to be the child, or you're going to have two children in the relationship. You're not going to have a mature, individuated, and separated adult relationship. It's such important work to be able to have these conversations that developmentally, you're going to cross so many thresholds because you've learned to stay calm. You've learned to communicate with an I feel. And then you're also able to give this to other people. So, for example, if you're the receiver and someone's trying to talk to you, this is not abusive people. You're in a relationship with somebody that you just have a hard time. Maybe they have an avoidant attachment style, meaning they avoid every hard conversation. Or maybe they're anxious. And so they're just like talking, but they're not really knowing how to talk about things in a healthy way because the anxiety just covers everything up. My number one strategy for that is mirror back what you hear them say. So you'll say, like, let's say your child is telling you something. You'll say, so what I hear you saying is you feel really scared and overwhelmed and stressed, and you just don't know where to even start. And they'll go, yes. And I'm so overwhelmed and I'm scared I'm not going to have any friends. And I just hate my life. So you're really scared you're not going to have friends and hate my life. Yes. And you don't have to say it exactly, but you want to paraphrase it and just say, did I get that? And they'll go, yes. And they'll keep talking. Great. That means we're processing. You've hit it. Great. Then we can offer empathy and say, that is so hard. It makes so much sense that you'd feel overwhelmed and stressed because you're starting a new school. Maybe you're starting college, you're starting middle school, elementary school, whatever it is. You're normalizing that, yeah, you feel some emotions about this transition. Let's start acknowledging, yeah, that all makes sense. Instead of making someone feel stupid or there's something wrong with them and shaming them for it. Stop trying to fix it. Stop trying to give them solutions. Just hold the space. Acknowledge how they feel. And I want you to do that for yourself. Just start going, yeah, that makes sense that you feel sad. That makes sense. You feel sad that a friend is moving away or your child's going to college or you've had to move jobs, sell your house, get a divorce. You've had a loss somehow. Something has happened that it makes sense. You have feelings. Know that in courageous conversations. Everybody has feelings. Let's stop pretending that nobody has feelings or shouldn't have feelings. We have to manage our intensity. That's my responsibility to manage my own intensity. And then let's say the conversation doesn't go well. We're going to say, you know what? I love you. And let's put a pin in this for another time. There might be a better time to have this conversation. Or you maybe decide you don't want to ever have this conversation again because it didn't go well. You still need to process what happened inside of you as a result of this conversation and acknowledge you did some huge growing because you didn't avoid a conversation. So practice this with healthy friends. Practice this with people that you can talk about can give you feedback. Hey, I noticed when you said I feel, you kind of went, I feel like you, and gave a statement and a judgment. You didn't really say how you felt. I really encourage you to come up with your centered message. What is it that you're trying to communicate exactly? And if you don't know, you've got to get clear on what you're trying to say to the person. If you don't know, that's on you to courageously look within to see, what am I communicating to this person? What am I trying to say? Get clear, write it down. I will pray often about a conversation and not being attached to the outcome. I will pray for openness, centeredness, connection. Ultimately, I want deep connection in whatever this relationship is, so we can be our authentic selves. We can be vulnerable. We can tell the truth, highly value truth. And I don't mean dumping, like vomiting on somebody. I mean your centered truth. Their truth is welcome. I want somebody to be who they are and be the freedom in that space. Real relationships can handle the truth. Real relationships can tell the truth. If you're in a relationship where you don't feel like you can tell the truth about who you are, what you feel, what you want, I highly encourage you to get into some therapy, do some journaling, listen to the podcast, start on a quest. That truth is at the epic center of your value for who you are, and that you can tolerate the truth. If you cannot tolerate the truth, you will not have truth in your life. So if you're like, ooh, I don't want to know what my partner's doing. Not that you need to be a detective, but if you don't welcome truth, truth will not prevail. If you're scared of truth or finding out, how someone really feels, then you're not going to welcome it in. And that will be a dead end road. Truth equals freedom and courageous conversations. And when you invite truth, loving, centered truth, even though it may be hard, it will free your life. Courageous conversations are the heart of connection. That is the birthplace of connection. Without them, it's a surface relationship. Without them, there is no deep connection, whether it's spiritually, emotionally, mentally. In all relationships, romantic relationships need them. Your children need them. They need to be able to have courageous conversations with their parents. Otherwise, we're going to have arrested development where emotions are going to be frozen in time and behaviors will manifest themselves. So it's never too late. I promise you, I believe in you. I'm cheering you on to not give up on courageous conversations, even though it's scary because we're so afraid of rejection. But if you can nurture that younger part of you and know this is for your development, you're going to get through it and get to the other side. So thank you for your willingness to have courageous conversations. Practice writing them out, writing letters, role playing them. Most importantly, centering yourself in that conversation. So if you have questions, you have scenarios, you have things that you want to get more information on, DM me on Instagram, just because there might be a follow-up podcast to this. I love it when you share kind of what your feedback is. And thank you for writing a review on the podcast. It makes my heart smile. I just am so grateful. My whole mission is just to be of service, to help you know you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you, that it's scary to grow and change. It's scary to have a boundary. It's scary to have courageous conversations. And yet the payoff is freedom, more connection, more love, more expansion. So I'm at Kristen D. Boyce on Instagram and Facebook, and then TikTok, Kristen Boyce. Still not figured that out. So no worries there. Thank you for joining me. I am so incredibly proud of you for the growth journey you're on. Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week, and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, Kristen, D, Boyce, BOICE.com. Thanks and have a great day.